think we're ready to start. So, hello everyone. My name is Ali Khayat. I'm a Surgery Kuwait organizing member, and I'm an registrar in the Kuwaiti Board of General Surgery. Welcome again to our fourth and last session of the ABCs of research, which will be focused on how to publish a paper. Will be, for those who's attending for the first time, our speaker of the series is Dr. Sarah Lioha, who's a plastic surgeon consultant working in Jabir Hospital. Welcome again, Dr. Sarah, for our last session.
Thank you so much again, and thank you everyone for attending during the Eid holidays. It shows great dedication from everyone. Thank you for whoever has been attending the entire series and giving up your Thursday afternoons. That's great. So, as you know, this is the final part of the series. Oops, sorry. Okay, there we go. So we talked about introducing the concept of critical appraisal, interpreting research results, how to write a paper, and now finally we're going to talk about how to publish a paper. So these are the three components we'll be discussing. We're going to talk about the editorial process, the submission process, and just a few pointers on responding to reviewers once you've submitted your paper. So I just wanted to give you a brief overview of the history of scientific journals, okay? These journals didn't exist forever. They started to come to existence in the 1600s. Prior to that, any new discovery that was announced as a monogram, and it was only accessible to a limited audience. So this is the method Isaac Newton used to promote his inventions and discoveries. And this caused a lot of disputes because people who were finding things simultaneously were not able to claim the fact that they were pioneers in this. So the Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society is really the first medical journal we had. The idea was considered radical at the time, which was promoting transparent and open exchange of ideas backed by experiment. Early journals were run by single individuals or small group, and it wasn't until the mid-20th century that peer review became a standard for scientific journals. The challenge at the time was that finding journal articles was very difficult. So historically, they'd have all these journals printed and lined up in libraries, and you had to physically go and search journals. And what really changed things is digitization of these databases and the internet coming into place. Although I still recall, like my early days in med school, there were some articles that I could only get in print, so I had to go to the library. And PubMed, which is the workhorse for us, was only released in 1996. And this allowed people to search for journal articles at the leisure of their home easily through the Medline interface. And for those of you who may not know, PubMed is maintained by the US National Library of Medicine and the NIH. So it's funded by them and maintained by them on a regular basis. There are other databases. So if you're going to do a systematic review, you have to go through the rest of them. Even though PubMed is our workhorse, we have Scopus, Web of Science, Google Scholar, Cochrane. So some articles might not be on the classic PubMed interface, and you might find them in these other platforms. And how are journals included in PubMed? So journals, to even be included in PubMed, have to meet very basic requirements, because you'll find some journals do not meet those criteria. They need a registration number, they need to have existed for at least a year, and you need a minimum to show proof that you have 40 peer-reviewed articles. Articles must contain abstracts and must meet Medline's language guidelines. So for anyone interested in setting that up, that's how it goes. How do I know if the journal is indexed by PubMed? So if I'm a journal, I want to publish in it, but I really need it to be indexed by PubMed. Well, you just go to the PubMed interface and click Explore, and you'll find a link to journal listings in PubMed. How are these journals funded? I think understanding this helps you understand your audience. So early journals were nonprofits. They were started by academic societies. And over time, commercial publishers started taking over, and they started acquiring top journals like The Lancet. So more than 50% of journal articles are published by those listed publishers: Springer Nature, Wiley Blackwell, Elsevier, Taylor Francis, and Sage. It's a very profitable industry with a 40% margin. Why? Because your two inputs are completely free. People submit articles for free, and the peer review process is free. So for publishers, this is like an amazing business. There's lots of new models being investigated, such as open publication models, to make the process more efficient. So this is where open access publishing has come into play. There has been a big backlash from scientists that, these publishers are trying to monetize all this work that really should be accessible to the public, and it should be free. And I know some people, see maybe open access journals as inferior, but it's really the future. Open access does give you advantages. There's more exposure to your work as most people can access it and read it. You have higher citation rates as a result. I know that it can influence policy, and in fact, some grant bodies like the Wellcome Trust, anyone who has a grant by the Wellcome Trust is only allowed to publish open access, which is why some of the non-classical open access journals now give you the option to make your article open access, because granting bodies will say that we're funding you through public money, so your article should be available to anyone in the public. And basically, people who might not have library subscriptions are able to see your work. So really, open access is actually in the spirit of science. The issue we have is some open access journals are legitimate, and then you have predatory journals who have just come into existence so they can take your money, but they're not very good journals. So how do I differentiate between the two? So the first thing to ask is the publisher well known, or is it some obscure publisher? Does the website contain the full contact information of the publisher, who's on the editorial board? Are they people who are well known in their field? Are the fees openly displayed? Another red flag is if you're asked to submit to the journal through an email. That should just make you raise a question. It might be legitimate, but it should give you pause for thought. Is the peer review process clearly delineated? And also, is it indexed in a prominent database? So for open access journal, you can go to the directory of open access journals or Open Access Scholarly Publishers Association and just see if that journal is listed there, because they tend to be vetted. And if you want to learn more about this, I put a link to the Think, Check, Submit checklist. So you just want to make sure that your work, even if you put an open access journal, is somewhere legitimate. I just put a few examples of credible open access journals. In fact, the Cancer Journal for Clinicians has an impact factor of 162, which is one of the highest in medicine. Mostly because it's mostly review articles, and those are highly cited. But you also have PLOS Medicine, PLOS Biology, Nature Communication. These are all high impact journals. So I just want to make the case that not all open access journals are made equal, and you should think about it. I put asterisks on two journals specifically: Scientific Reports and PLOS One. These are journals that don't care about your content as long as you have valid methodology. So, if you're working in a niche subject or an area that might not have a wide audience, as long as your science is good, those journals, if you pass a review process, will actually publish your article. So it's a good avenue for subjects that tend to be less popular. Because if you notice, most journals like to publish in 5 main areas, like Alzheimer's, cancer. These are hot, highly cited topics. So if you're doing something a bit more niche, just something to consider. A lot of people ask, how do I find a suitable journal for my article? Because it can be a little bit overwhelming. You have thousands and thousands and thousands of journals, and it's difficult to know where to start. One good place to start is just look at your citations. So when you write your background, your introduction, your discussion, you have cited a lot of similar work. So just take a look at where these articles reside. You can also look at journal rankings, and if you're not sure, just ask peers or colleagues for some guidance. If all else fails and you're still unsure, there's tons of electronic journal selectors. So I put a whole list of them. that you can take a look at later. But basically what you do is you upload your article's title and abstract, and they'll use AI to basically find you suitable journals. So they'll put a list of suggested journals that are suitable for your topic. So I use this sometimes if I'm publishing in an area that is not my primary area, which is like plastic surgery. So sometimes it just gives you an idea of what are the key journals in those fields. Now, if you have a selection of journals and you want to dig deeper and decide which one you're going to submit to, and you should have a few in mind. It's rare that you're going to set your mind to one journal. Start by looking at the journal's website where you'll find their aims and scope. So you want to know, does my article subject and type match the journal and the target audience? Because, for example, if you're publishing something related to, I don't know, COVID, and then the journal you pick just does basic science and yours is clinical, then it's never going to get accepted because it's just not the right fit. So you're almost like a dating service between your article and the journal. You want to find things that match. Second factor, which a lot of people focus on, is prestige and visibility. So, you know, some lower impact journals are fine because they're the main journals in your field. For example, in plastic surgery, our highest impact journal has an impact of like 4.7. So that's always going to be my target journal because that's what my peers would be reading. You can also look at impact factor and other things that I'll talk about a little bit more detail later, but it's not the end all be all, right? You want your work to reach people within your field. You also, one thing I'd give you as a tip is look at the publication process and the review. So what is the turnaround time for paper? Are there charges? Is it open access? How frequently is it published? What's the acceptance rate? These metrics just give you an idea of how fast the process will move for you. The turnaround time is like, I don't know, 8 months. It's probably not even worth your time, even if it's a high impact journal. So what is impact factors that we've been referring to over and over again, and you'll see people talk about it. It's basically just a scoring system. It was devised by Eugene Garfield, who founded the Institute for Scientific Information, so ISI. It's a score that's released annually for journals, and it's listed in the Journal Citation Report since 1975. ISI was then acquired by Thomson Scientific, and it became Thomson ISI, and recently they sold it to Clarivate. So now Clarivate is the publisher of the Journal Citation Reports. So the way it's calculated, it's the classic way, it's calculated over 2 years. So if you want to calculate the impact factor in 2020, A would be the number of times articles published in 2018 and 2019 were cited by index journals in 2020. B is the total number of citable items published in those journals in 2018, 2019. So you just divide A to B, which gives you the average number of times articles published over 2 years have been cited. That's fine, and it's what we use, but you know, there's other metrics you can use, and we'll talk about why that's important too. Another resource you can go to is the SciMago Journal Rank, which is a measure of the scientific influence of journals. It accounts for the number of citations plus the prestige of the journals where the citations came from, and they use it to calculate the average weighted citations during the previous 3 years. So if you go to their websites, you'll see this. So if you search for surgery journals, it will rank them from top to bottom. And then if you look at the boxes in green, it says Q1, Q2, Q3. So Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4 is just the quartile of the rank for the journal. So you'll see lots of people say, I only want to publish in a Q1 journal, which means that journal is in the top 25%. Again, it's not like imperative, but just another metric you can look at when you're assessing that journal. Like we said, there's other journal metrics we alluded to earlier, things that are related to process time related stuff, like time for an editorial decision, time for peer review decision. And then there's more modern ones like immediacy index, eigen factor, article influence score, 2-year median. I don't want to delve into them in more detail. There's also the altimetric score, but recently all the journals signed an agreement called DORA. So they think there's been too much emphasis on impact factor because, you know, as a score that's imperfect, it's highly skewed towards certain journals. So they all signed an agreement that they're going to start to utilize other metrics of quality instead of just focusing on the one metric that can lead to a lot of bias. If you want to find out information about journals like impact factor, et cetera, I just put the link to the Clarivate website. You can use the Web of Science interface. You have to create an account and a login to access it. And then once you're logged in, you can search by journal or by topic. And, you know, I just put plastic surgery in the search here. And once you click on the journal, it'll give you all sorts of metrics for that journal that you can look at when you assess it. So that's what I'll say about some of the editorial process. Talking about submission and things to consider. So key players in a journal, who runs these journals? So you have editors, and editors, their job is to decide, is the article a good fit of the journal for the journal, and they decide whether to send it to reviewers or not. They don't review your article, they just decide whether it should go for review or not. And the second job they have is they organize the content itself. You also have administrative staff. So these are the people who might do the proofing for your article, run the digital library, et cetera. Then you have reviewers. So reviewers don't work for the journal. They're just, any one of us can be a reviewer. They're people that the editor will send reviews to, and editors start having favorite reviewers if they have a good experience that they'll keep sending them to so that they can review the content and methodology. And then you have authors, so anyone who's writing an article. So what happens after you submit a paper? So this is a diagram to what happens, and I'm sure most of you have gone through this. So briefly, the author submits a paper. It goes to the editor. Then the editor either decides, no, don't like it, and tells the author. So we call this a desk rejection. Or they say, you know what, this is interesting. Let's send it for review. So they'll pick reviewers and send the articles to them. Once the reviewers accept, they will perform their peer review. Then the peer review sends their reviews back to the editor, and then the editor decides, am I gonna accept this? Am I gonna ask for a revision, or I'm gonna reject it? You know, 99% of the time, or maybe 90%, like things are sent for a revision. So they'll send it back to the author, who's gonna revise and resubmit, send it back to editor, who forwards it to the reviewer. And if after that, the reviewers and the editors are happy, then your article gets accepted. Once your article is accepted, it gets sent to be proofed. So the proof is just the draft. The copywriters will go through it, and the publisher will go through it to make sure that it looks right, the word content is fine, check the tables, check the figures, and then it gets sent to be published. And usually now, we rarely have printed journals. Most of them are digital. How do I know if my manuscript is ready? Okay, to even submit it in the first place. Look at three things for you before you submit it. Before you submit it, you want to see, is it relevant? I hope you would have thought of that before you started the entire project, but is it going to add to the body of knowledge? Is it original? And is my methodology valid? Did I choose the correct research design and methods to address the questions? If you want to know if your manuscript is formatted properly, you can just access this on the ICJME website. So they have guidelines. So it will tell you where to put everything and what you should include in your manuscript. Of course, you'd also refer to the journal guidelines, but if you're not sure and you're going to submit it to more than one journal, just follow the ICJME guidelines. It will apply to most journals that you're going to submit to. Here's the manuscript submission checklist, courtesy of RPOP Shore. So like we said, check the format, the word count, the margins, the numbering. You know, if your manuscript is not formatted right, it will just be rejected outright. So it's worth spending time on this. You want to check your structure is right, the language and flow is good, you have the right graphics and they're well prepared, they're in the right order, you have all the details, you have detailed author information, acknowledgement, you've written your cover letter, which we'll talk about a little bit later. You've mentioned the conflicts of interest and whether you've complied with ethical guidelines. So I guess it's a good checklist to just go through before you go ahead with your submission. If you have issues in terms of language and grammar, then I suggest if you don't have co-authors who can help you with this regard, then there are credible professional editing services that will do it for free for you. So you can go to Editage, Scribendi, Manuscript Edit, Adans. These are all reputable companies, and you can send them your manuscript and they'll do all the editing for you if you have the money, I guess. They tend to be sometimes a bit pricey, and their services can extend to submitting the journal article for you, selecting the journal for you, so they can just do the whole thing if you have a grant, for example, and just want to get it done with. Although I would encourage you to do it yourself, because you learn a lot when you do it and you get to save money. If you want to check if your article is original, you can always, first of all, put your manuscript through a plagiarism checker. Okay, because all publishers will do that, and if there's any evidence of plagiarism, they will just reject it. Plus, it would be bad form. You can also look at any of these websites. So these are websites look at connected papers or citations. So if you put, some of the core articles that you've cited, they'll tell you what are the key articles, and you might find something similar to yours. Another tip I give you is create and maintain a list of your author details, because it's very rare that you're going to submit an article and it will just get accepted. So sometimes you have to plan for submitting to at least like 3 journals, maybe more, depending on what you're publishing on. So it's a nuisance to keep finding your co-authors' emails and their affiliations and their conflicts and whatever. So what you can do is just create an Excel sheet and check your co-authors' names, because it's once it's proofed and published, you can't really change that. Make sure you have their credentials, write a list of the roles in their study, and make sure that they've checked the final proof that all your authors have gone through it. Also, something that I wasn't paying attention for, but trying to pay attention to it now, is keyword selection. Keyword selection is very important to your editor and very important to the journal, because it improves your journal impact factor by finding your article easier to retrieve in search engines. So try to use your keywords in both your title and abstract so that it's easily found. And I think this can make your article more attractive to editors. Also, another tip is make sure you use a reference manager. I think I've said this during every talk so far. You can refer to some of the older talks related to this. It's nice if you can add DOIs to your reference list. Crossref.org will help you in that regard. The advantage of this is it's something your editor would do. So by making life easier for your editor, you're making it easier for your article to be accepted. And if you've gone through a few submissions, make sure that you update your references as you go along, because this is something you'd get picked up on. Another thing now in our modern days is get yourself an ORCID ID. So an ORCID ID is a unique serial number for you as a researcher. You can get it by going to that website, orcid.org, and it addresses the problem that certain people's names might be hard to recognize. For example, if your name is Mohammed Ahmed, there might be thousands. So it's hard for people to find your articles. So if you have an ORCID ID, most journals would ask you for that anyway. But the advantage it has is, makes it easier to find yourself. Okay, writing a compelling cover letter. So anytime you communicate with the editor, whether you're submitting a journal, doing revisions, you want to ask for extensions, you're always gonna be communicating in a letter format. Okay, a cover letter is the letter that goes with your article when you first submit it. And the objective is to emphasize the impact and the relevance of your manuscript. So it's gonna highlight how it's innovative, how it's different, and you're gonna explain why you selected the chosen journal. as well as an opportunity for you to disclose any conflicts, financial relationship, and if your study has published elsewhere, for example, if you've submitted it for a podium presentation at a conference. So this is really important because it's sometimes the only thing the editor will look at. So some editors confess that they don't bother reading your manuscript. They look at the title, glance at the abstract, and then look at your cover letter, and based on that, they'll decide whether to publish or not. So I'm not going to read this cover letter, but I put a template that I found online for you guys to use. And the usual format is Dear So-and-so. Try to use the editor's name, not just like Dear Sir or Madam. Definitely don't do Dear Sir if your editor is female, which some people do. And then I would like you to consider the manuscript entitled, you put the name for your journal, and then the cover letter explains why it's unique, why it's special, why the journal would be interested, and why the readers would be interested. So if you're starting off and you haven't done this before, you can just use this template and edit accordingly. By the way, at the end, I'll put a website, but they have tons of these templates online on our PubSure. So I'd recommend you use that and look at the course, which is related to journal communication. So once you're ready, you're going to submit your paper for publication. So how do you do that? I'm sure most of you know. You go to the journal website, you'll go check the submission requirements, see if you've met all of them, and then you're going to create an account on the journal website to begin the submission process. Here's an example. So I decided we're going to submit to Annals of Surgery. So this is the section you're usually looking for. It says just for authors. Okay, once you go, it will have information about the article, and it has a submit a manuscript button for you to click on. Once you do that, you're going to enter the submission platform. So what you see here is in blue, it says submit a new manuscript. So you'd click that and just follow the processes. This is also the website where the journal will update you on the status of your article. So it will tell you whether your submission is being processed, whether it's been rejected, whether it's for review. And they use a lot of generic terminology in all the journals. So for your reference, I put a list of them. So this is on the left-hand column, it's your status of your manuscript, and then what it means, what the average time frame is. So manuscript submitted means you've submitted successfully, and this usually changes within 1 to 2 weeks in terms of status. I'm not going to read it, but it's there for you to refer to if you ever submit an article and you wonder, what does with editor mean? Okay, with editor means review's done and it's going to get to you within a week or two. So found it's helpful because sometimes your article is stuck in one of these boxes for weeks and it's confusing. And this is, as a side point, you can, if your article is stuck in a status, feel free to email the editor and ask them why that is the case if it doesn't meet these average timeframes. Okay, last bit I'll talk about is responding to reviewers. So you've submitted your manuscript successfully, it's gone for review. Okay, again, why do we need peer review? It helps the editor check that the article meets the journal's expectation. And honestly, it's an opportunity to improve your manuscript. If your article went for review and then it got rejected, it's not necessarily a bad thing. The reviewers just gave you free pointers and tips to improve your manuscript. It's honestly just appreciated. Reviewers are most of the time, almost certainly unpaid, and they've taken the time to improve your manuscript. And the more comments they give you, the better it is. You know, a reviewer that puts 3 lines doesn't care, but someone who puts detailed comments and has really taken the time, you know, this is someone who's been extremely helpful to you, and it's definitely a good thing, because I've seen people get sensitive if they get like detailed reviews back and they get upset and they think it's personal. This is science. Lots of reviews, lots of comments. It's good. Everything is an opportunity to improve your paper. There's many types of peer reviews, especially with modern journals. There's the classic single blind review. So the reviewer knows who you are, but you don't know who the reviewer is. The problem with that, it's prone to what they call status bias. So some reviewers, if you come from maybe Kuwait versus Harvard, they might not see you in the same light. Double blind review is becoming more common, but it's not as common as single blind, where The authors don't know who the reviewers are, and the reviewers don't know who the authors are. And honestly, I think this is a more fair process. You also have other types of review, like open review. So some of the journals are curious, like your reviews are published for everyone to see. You also have collaborative peer review and cascading peer review. So cascading peer review is like if I submit to BMJ and BMJ says, your article is okay, but it doesn't match BMJ, you can submit it to BMJ Open. So you're like going through the cascade for that journal. How do editors select reviewers? So you tend to have two kinds of reviewers. So an editor, they're going to pick usually a minimum of two reviewers. And if you're going to pick two, you want one reviewer who's good at methodology, who's going to focus on research design and analysis to determine if the study is valid. And then you have content reviewers. So these are reviewers who look at the relevance, the scope, the originality of the content. You know, is the study of interest to the journal's readers or people in the field? So what are the possible outcomes of peer review? Like we said earlier, could just be rejected, revise and resubmit, most common, and then accepted with major revisions, minor revisions, and accepted with no revisions. I think accepted with no revisions is super rare. So how do you respond to these comments? Okay, take the time to just read it carefully. Okay, and then once you've read it again, put it away, and then come to it another day, because your first read will probably be like a little bit emotional, and you know, none of us likes criticism, but we need to embrace it. Then read it again, create an inventory of the comments. And you know, when you do this, you really need to free up a few hours for this, because it needs a lot of attention, because a lot of it is paying attention to detail. So once you create an inventory of the comments, categorize them into matching themes, major, minor comments, or themed comments. And if you have really long comments, just separate them into separate points and try to address each of these comments systematically, okay? And make it easy for your editor to track your changes, okay? And when you have a comment, you have two options. You're either gonna revise it or you're gonna rebut. So you're either gonna say, thank you for your great suggestion, here are the changes, or if you don't change it, you need to at least explain why you didn't change it. Like, thank you for your comment. However, we believe this is fine because blah, blah, blah. Okay. And don't forget, in the cover letter, thank the reviewers for reviewing your work. This is the cover letter when you send your revisions. Everything you submit has to have some form of a cover letter. So here's a suggestion. This is not something that always done, but I thought it's a good idea, is make a table to organize your response to your reviewer comments. So on the left-hand column, you're going to put what you were asked to do. So these are your reviewer comments. So point 1, point 2, point 3, point 4, point 5, okay? And you can divide them into reviewer 1, reviewer 2, and reviewer 3. In the second column, what you did, so how you addressed the comment. So did you add a clarification? Did you include a reference? What did you do? And then the third column, I think a lot of editors will appreciate it, is just put where the changes can be found so that the revisions can be easily accessed by your editor. So you just say page 2, paragraph 3, line, whatever. And when you format your page, if you put line number, I think it's helpful. So your editor can easily cross-reference your changes. Remember, making life easy for your editor is always a good thing. So what the editors are looking for once you've responded to peer review is they want to know, did the authors do what they were asked to do by the reviewers? Because if you didn't at all, then they're not going to accept it. And then the second thing is, are the changes in the text and are they easy to find? Okay. So let's say you go all through that and then your article gets rejected. Okay. Lots of people ask why. Okay. You can ask the editor, but they're busy people. So usually what's wrong? And you know, this depends. Was it a desk rejection? Like within, usually desk rejections just take a day or two, or did it go for peer review and then you got rejected? Okay. Number of things can go wrong. Desk rejection, sometimes it's the wrong journal. So you just need to look for more suitable journals. The other aspect, it's not original. So you need to reevaluate and find the original angle for you. Common rejection is low readership interest. So try to highlight the impact of the article to a general audience, or you might have to pick a journal where the readership would be interested. Then there's more serious issues, study design issues. It's difficult to alter your design once you've done your study, but maybe you can add bits to it. Poor writing, organization style, like definitely get help with editing if that's an issue. Lack of adherence to the journal submission guideline, like word limits. These little silly things can get your manuscript rejected. So all your hard work goes to waste. Unintentional ethical issues like plagiarism. So definitely worth going through plagiarism checkers to make sure you meet those guidelines. And then just like having poor figures and tables. So get help from peers or professionals, whatever is accessible to you. So what do you do after rejection? Definitely don't get upset. This is, like we said, an opportunity for improvement. Like we said, analyze the cause, get opinions from your peers, make the appropriate changes, and maybe sometimes you just need to lower your expectation. If you're doing a case study and you're submitting it to New England Journal of Medicine, maybe you should just aim a little bit higher, and for sure try over and over and over again until you hit the bullseye. So these are the things we went through today, and these are the recommended resources. So Nature has master classes, but I think you need a subscription from your institute, or you can go to Upskill Researcher Life, which has lots of free courses that you can do related to the subject, and it's quite helpful. If you have any questions that I'm not going to answer today, this is my email. Feel free to email me about anything. And thank you for your attention throughout this course. It's been great. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sarah, for the wonderful presentation. We do actually have a couple of questions in the Q&A panel if you want to have a look.
Yeah. Okay. So the first question is, can you send the manuscript to more than one journal simultaneously? No, you cannot. And you should not do that. And if you do that, you should declare it. But I don't, usually most journals have copyright issues. So once you submit somewhere, you have to wait till you get rejected before you can submit elsewhere. Next question is, how can we strengthen our research to be published? Like I said, it all comes down to the right content and the right research design. So think of the topic itself. Is it going to be of interest to a wide audience, or is no one going to care about it? And then second of all, make sure you pick the right research design and methodology to answer that question. Next one is, does peer review mean critical appraisal of the manuscript? Yeah, peer review is sort of like a critical appraisal of the manuscript. So it can be structured or unstructured. So some journals will give you like tables or check boxes for you to say whether you think it should be accepted. Is it well formatted? Is the language okay? And then some of them just let you write in free text. But the idea of the peer review is just for someone to see if you've met the journal's requirements, basically. Okay, next question. If the authors were out of the field of study, does that limit or weaken the possibility of publishing the paper? Not necessarily. I think like during COVID, I published things that are definitely not within my field, and they've gotten into reasonable journals. So I think as long as the content is good, as the methodology is good, it doesn't really matter what your field of study is. Do you get a benefit if you're co-authoring or you're authoring from a prestigious institution? A lot of studies say, yes, it does help, but I think you can be from any field of study. All the editors and peer reviewers will care about is whether your work is of good quality. Okay, next question. Is it okay to highlight the revised part in different colors? Yeah, absolutely. I've done that before. I think it's fine as long as the color you choose is not too light and is clear on the computer desk or if it was printed. Next question is, when do you send a manuscript? I guess you send a manuscript and they send it back for you for review. Can you change the journal at that time? Like saying, thank you, I got your point, and submit to another journal? Yeah, you can certainly do that. But if you pick that journal and it went for peer review, I would at least send the revisions back, because peer review takes 3 months. So if you're gonna pull your paper out, I think that doesn't really make sense unless you decided that it's not the right journal for your article. So if you've waited 3 months and all you have to do is respond to the reviewers, then it's not going to take a lot of your time. But yeah, I mean, if you're going to withdraw your manuscript, you have the right to withdraw your manuscript anytime during this process. All you have to do, send an email to the editor, and what they're going to sorry, hold on a second. Okay, so basically, yeah, it's something you can do. Yeah, apologies. There's a website called SciHub that you can be used for journals. Yeah, you can do that, use SciHub, but technically SciHub is illegal, so I can't like promote it, but feel free to use it, yeah. And they keep changing the URL because it's, I think it's like a lady in Kazakhstan who runs it and has managed to plagiarize all the articles, but it's technically like it's illegal. How long does the publishing process take usually? It depends on the journal. Some of them are very fast. So from getting accepted to being published might take like just a few weeks, and some of them take months. So you can find sometimes in good journals, they'll tell you those stats. Okay, should I move to the chat box?
I think there is one last question in the Q&A.
Which journal is most likely to accept a cancer retrospective study paper? I mean, honestly, the good thing about cancer is you have tons of journals to pick from because it's such a broad topic. So I would need more detail. And like I said, if you're not sure, just put your abstract and title in one of those journal selectors, and it will give you a list of suggestions for what's most suitable to you. And then the next question is, can I buy some research? I don't know what you mean by can I buy some research, but you can hire people to help you with your research. So if you hate data collection, I'm sure you can find someone local, or like there's tons of freelancers who can help you with writing research or any aspects of it now. I mean, we live in an online world, so it's pretty straightforward compared to before. But yeah, I mean, try to do it. It's cheaper for you. What journal do you think is good for obesity case reports? And they accept case reports since, yeah, I think we referred to this in our last talk, which is I would go for journals that are specific for case reports, and they tend to be open access. I think that's the easiest platform, because if you go to the general journals now, they don't tend to accept case reports unless you're writing them as a letter to the editor. And if that is the case, see if the letters to the editors are similar to what you're doing. If not, then there's like Journal of Surgical Case Reports, those kind of things, or medical case reports you can use. Hope that answers the question. The next one is, how do I have access to hospital files to collect data? It will entirely depend on your hospital and what sort of medical records they use. If they're using paper charts, then you probably need to go to the hospital medical records section and ask them for those. Then you would have had to have a list of patient files or identifiers. If it's an electronic medical record system, it's a little bit easier, but you just need permission from medical records, and you need ethical approval to access it. But that's basically the way you would do it. Is ethical approval hard to get? Ethical approval can be hard or easy, depending on which body you're submitting it to. So if you're submitting it to for example, in Kuwait, it would be different to if you're submitting it in the UK. I think the Kuwait process is, for me, a little bit easier than trying to get ethics in Canada, for example. If you're doing retrospective studies, things where there's no direct intervention, ethical approval is much easier. So chart reviews, retrospective reviews tend to be easier because they're inconsequential. If you're going to give patients drug or do things to patients, I think it can take much longer because it needs to be sent to multiple bodies to approve it. So depends on the study, depends on your ethical review board, how fast it is.
I think that's the last question. And thank you so much, Dr. Sarah, for answering all of these questions. It's been a pleasure having you throughout the series. And for all of the 4 lectures, it's been inspiring to get us all back on our research. I personally myself have been back into some research. It's been amazing. Thank you again, Sarah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the invitation and appreciate all your time. There are 2 more questions that popped up. Do you want me to answer them quickly?
Yes, sure.
One, it says, can I copy any research but do it here in Saudi Arabia? I think you can, but then you will be limited to Saudi journals, I guess, because wider readership might not be interested. And then it says, I published 2 researches in journals which are not highly visible and strong. Should I embrace it and hide it? Just embrace it. It's your work. Let it shine. I am not a journal snob by any means. I think if it's good work, who cares? Some people now, they're just publishing their own work on open platform websites, so that's fine. And thank you all for all your interest and engagement with this. It's been great. Thank you so much for inviting me.
You're welcome. We hope to see you more often with us in the future, inshallah. And once again, Eid Mubarak for everyone. And thank you all for spending your holidays with us here. Before we go, as usual, you feel free to register for our upcoming series. We'll be resuming plastic surgery foundation course on Saturday with Dr. Brian Lebeau from the United States on congenital breast diseases. And we'll be having 2 more lectures of surgical fix series by Dr. Jaber Al-Ali on ERCP and by Dr. Noreen Leblouchi on biliary stones, primary and secondary stones. You can register for all the sessions on the QR codes or on the chat box. And we'll be keeping those for a few minutes. Thank you again for everyone for attending, and see you all next session.